My beloved child, stop scrolling and remain here for a moment, because what has found you now is not an ordinary message. Something has been waiting at the edge of your awareness, calling quietly through every memory you tried to bury, every question you never received an answer to, and every night you wondered why a connection so powerful could become so silent. You did not arrive here by accident. These words have come to meet you at the exact moment when a hidden truth is preparing to rise. Before the person connected to your heart finally lets you go, there is something they know they must tell you, something they should have confessed years ago. Do not move away too quickly. There is a reason your spirit became still when you heard those words. Deep within you, there has always been a sense that the story was incomplete. You may have tried to accept the distance. You may have told yourself that some people enter our lives only to leave behind a lesson. You may have attempted to close the door, gather your dignity, and keep walking. Yet even as you moved forward, a quiet feeling remained. Something had been left unsaid. Something important had been hidden behind pride, poor timing, fear, and a silence that became heavier with every passing year. The one your heart still recognizes has been carrying a confession. It did not disappear when the conversations ended. It did not fade when circumstances changed. It followed them into quiet rooms, unfamiliar places, crowded gatherings, and sleepless nights. At times they believed they had buried it deeply enough to live without confronting it. But truth does not remain buried forever. What belongs in the light will eventually find its way there, and now the moment they once feared is approaching. Stay here, because the first revelation is not what you expect. They are not only afraid of losing you. They are afraid you will finally understand how long they have known what you meant to them. They are afraid you will discover that their confusion was not the absence of love. Their distance was not proof that you were unimportant. Their silence did not mean your presence had been forgotten. In many ways, the silence existed because the truth was larger than they knew how to carry. Years ago, something happened inside them when they realized the connection between you was becoming real. Until that moment, they could treat it lightly. They could hide behind ordinary words, casual smiles, delayed replies, and half-finished conversations. But then there came a moment, small to the outside world, unforgettable to their soul, when they looked at you and understood that you could become the person who changed everything. They remember that moment more clearly than you know. Perhaps it was something you said without realizing its power. Perhaps you looked at them with a gentleness they had never received before. Perhaps you stood beside them when everyone else seemed to misunderstand. Perhaps you laughed, and for one brief second, they imagined hearing that sound in a home you shared. Whatever the moment was, it opened a door inside them. Behind that door was a future they had secretly desired but never believed they deserved. That was when fear entered. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your presence touched the place they had spent years protecting. You reached beyond the image they showed the world. You saw the uncertainty beneath their confidence, the tenderness beneath their silence, and the longing beneath their careful distance. They sensed that you could see who they truly were, and instead of feeling only relief, part of them panicked. Listen closely, because this is where the story begins to change. They did not pull away because they felt nothing. They pulled away because they felt too much and did not know whether they could survive being known so completely. They had learned to manage connections that remained on the surface. They knew how to leave before becoming vulnerable. They knew how to pretend that timing was the problem. They knew how to blame circumstances, responsibilities, confusion, and even you. What they did not know was how to stand still before someone who awakened a love they could not control. You questioned yourself because of their hesitation. You wondered whether you had imagined the depth. You replayed conversations, searched for mistakes, and carried emotional weight that never belonged to you. There were moments when you believed that being more patient, more understanding, or less expressive might have changed the outcome. But heaven wants you to release that burden now. Their silence was born from a battle inside them, not from a lack inside you. Pause here. Something extraordinary is waiting beneath the next layer. There was a sentence they almost said to you years ago. They carried it to the edge of their lips more than once. One time, they may have even begun the conversation and then changed the subject. You sensed the shift. You felt the air become heavier. Their eyes may have held yours longer than usual, as though they were searching for courage. But then fear took over, and the moment passed. That sentence was not merely, "I love you." It was something even more vulnerable. They wanted to tell you, "You are the first person who made me want to stop running." Those words frightened them because they revealed too much. To admit that you made them want to stay would mean admitting that they had been running for years. Running from rejection. Running from responsibility. Running from the possibility that happiness could be offered and then taken away. Running from old wounds they had never properly faced. Running from the belief that anyone who came close would eventually discover they were not enough. You saw their behavior, but you could not see the history beneath it. Before you, there had been moments that taught them to expect disappointment. Promises had been broken. Trust had been mishandled. Affection had sometimes been used as a condition instead of given as a gift. They learned to protect themselves by pretending they needed no one. They learned to remain emotionally prepared for an ending, even at the beginning. Then you arrived, and your presence challenged every defense they had built. You did not force them to feel. You simply existed in a way that reminded them of what love could be when it was sincere. That is why your absence never felt ordinary to them. They attempted to continue. They tried to convince themselves that the connection belonged to another chapter. They compared new people to you without admitting it. They searched for your kindness in other voices, your patience in other eyes, your understanding in other conversations. Sometimes they found qualities they admired, but the feeling was never the same. Something essential was missing, because what they had experienced with you was not created by appearance, convenience, or perfect circumstances. It was recognition. Their soul recognized a place of rest before their mind was ready to accept it. Do not skip this moment, because the next truth carries the weight of everything they never explained. They thought they had more time. They believed they could remain silent until they understood themselves. They assumed that when they were ready, you would still be there, waiting in the same emotional place. They did not realize that their delay was teaching you how to survive without them. While they were postponing the truth, you were changing. You learned to wake up without expecting their message. You learned to calm yourself when memories returned unexpectedly. You learned to smile while carrying unanswered questions. You learned that love could remain in your heart without controlling your steps. Slowly, painfully, beautifully, you began to rebuild the parts of yourself that had become attached to their choices. They noticed. Even from a distance, they felt the change. Your energy stopped reaching for them in the same way. Something that had always seemed available began to close. The invisible assurance that you would understand forever began to disappear. At first, they tried to ignore it. Then they felt unsettled. Then they realized what was happening. You were not waiting anymore. And that realization awakened the confession they had buried. There has been a recent moment when they understood that letting you go might become permanent. It may have come through something they heard, something they saw, or simply a sudden stillness that forced them to face themselves. Perhaps they noticed you becoming happier without them. Perhaps they heard that your life was moving in a new direction. Perhaps someone mentioned your name, and the sound of it struck a place they had kept guarded for too long. Whatever happened, it shook them. For years, they believed the door between you was closed but not locked. Now they fear that you may be the one preparing to lock it, not in anger, but in peace. That is what terrifies them most. They could understand losing you through conflict. They could blame circumstances if everything ended dramatically. But losing you because you finally healed would leave them with no one to blame but themselves. Their heart is now standing before a choice it can no longer avoid. Should they remain silent and let you walk into a future that may no longer include them? Or should they finally reveal what happened years ago, knowing the truth might arrive too late? Stay till the end, because something larger is unfolding. This is not merely a story about regret. It is about the moment when a soul can no longer hide from its own honesty. The person connected to you is beginning to understand that confession is not always about getting someone back. Sometimes confession is the final act of respect. Sometimes the truth must be spoken because the other person deserved it long ago. They know you deserved clarity. You deserved to know that they noticed every act of care you thought went unseen. They remember the times you checked on them when your own heart was tired. They remember how you listened beyond their words. They remember the way you gave them space without making them feel abandoned. They remember how you saw potential in them when they could barely see it in themselves. They remember one particular moment when you gave them a chance to be honest. You may not even realize how important that moment was. Perhaps you asked a simple question. Perhaps you said, "You can tell me the truth." Perhaps you gave them one quiet opening where everything could have changed. They saw the doorway. They wanted to step through it. Yet fear whispered that honesty would make them powerless. So they gave you less than the truth. That decision has followed them. They have replayed what they should have said. They have imagined how the story might have changed if they had trusted you. In their mind, they have returned to that conversation many times, giving you the answer they withheld. But memories cannot be rewritten by imagination. The only thing they can change is what they do now. And now, the words inside them are becoming impossible to contain. My love, before I let you go, there is something I should have told you years ago. That is how the confession begins. But the sentence that follows is the one that may change everything. It is not a demand. It is not an excuse. It is not an attempt to erase the pain. They know they cannot return to the past and repair every moment their silence damaged. They know an apology cannot automatically rebuild trust. They know love does not give anyone the right to disturb the peace you worked hard to create. This awareness is why they have waited again, even now. They do not want to return with empty promises. They do not want to speak because they feel lonely for one night. They do not want to offer emotions without the strength to stand behind them. Something within them understands that you no longer need beautiful words alone. You need honesty with responsibility. You need vulnerability with consistency. You need a truth that does not disappear the moment fear returns. For the first time, they are asking themselves whether they can become the person their confession requires them to be. This is the hidden spiritual battle surrounding the connection. Love may awaken the heart, but courage determines what the heart is willing to do. They loved you in silence, but silent love could not protect you from confusion. They missed you privately, but private longing could not give you security. They imagined a future, but imagination could not replace action. Now heaven is pressing a single truth upon them: if they speak, they must be prepared to stand inside the consequences of their words. You are not being called to chase them. You are not being told to reopen a door without wisdom. You are being shown what has remained hidden so that you stop interpreting their past behavior as proof that you were unworthy. Their struggle belonged to them. Your value was never decided by their readiness. Let these words settle into the wounded places within you. You were not too difficult to love. You were not too much. You did not ask for something unreasonable when you wanted honesty, effort, and emotional presence. You were simply asking someone who had not yet learned how to give what their own heart desperately needed. The years changed both of you. You became stronger in ways you never intended. They became more aware in ways they resisted. The distance became a teacher. It showed you that your life could continue. It showed them that your love was never guaranteed to remain available forever. Now the energy around this connection feels different because a decision is forming. They have been thinking about reaching out. Not impulsively. Not casually. They have considered the hour, the words, and the possibility that you may not respond. They have imagined hearing your voice and finding it changed. They have feared the calmness in you, because calmness would confirm that you survived the storm they created. Yet beneath the fear is something stronger. The need to finally tell you why they left the truth unspoken. There was another reason beyond fear, and this is where the mystery deepens. Someone's opinion influenced them more than they admitted. It may have been a family member, a close friend, or someone whose approval they had been conditioned to seek. This person planted doubt at a vulnerable moment. They questioned whether the connection could work. They suggested that your differences were too great, your timing too complicated, or your bond too intense to be trusted. Your soulmate listened. Not because they believed every word, but because the doubts echoed fears already living inside them. Instead of defending what they felt, they allowed another voice to become louder than their own heart. They told themselves they were being practical. They convinced themselves that stepping back was the responsible choice. But deep down, they knew they were betraying something real. The person who influenced them may not have understood the depth of your bond. They saw only the visible complications. They did not feel what happened in the silence between you. They did not witness the way your soulmate's energy changed when your name appeared. They did not know how deeply your presence had become connected to their hope. Still, your soulmate allowed that outside voice to shape a decision that belonged only to their heart. This is part of what they should have told you years ago. They should have admitted, "I let other people's fears become my reason for hurting you." They are ashamed of that truth. They know you may ask why their love was not strong enough to defend you. They know you may wonder why they allowed others to decide the future of a connection those people never truly understood. They have no perfect answer. All they can say is that at the time, they were not strong enough to separate wisdom from fear. But something has changed. The same person who once influenced them may have recently said something unexpected. Perhaps they admitted they misjudged you. Perhaps they saw your soulmate's unhappiness and realized the separation did not bring peace. Perhaps they finally understood that the bond was not a passing emotion. A conversation has taken place, or is about to take place, that will remove one of the final excuses your soulmate has been hiding behind. Do not skip now. The next revelation is even closer to the truth. Your soulmate has kept something connected to you. It may be a photograph, a message, a gift, a note, or something so small that another person would never understand its value. They did not keep it because they were unable to move forward with life. They kept it because it represents the moment they felt most seen. There have been nights when they returned to it. Not every night. Not with obsession. But in moments when the noise faded and honesty became unavoidable, they looked at what remained and remembered the version of themselves that existed around you. They remembered how hope felt. They remembered that there was once someone who believed in them before they learned how to believe in themselves. The object became a quiet witness to everything they did not say. Recently, they held it again. This time, something was different. Instead of only remembering you, they saw the cost of their silence. They understood that the memory was no longer comforting them. It was confronting them. It seemed to ask the question they had avoided for years: how can you claim this person mattered if you never gave them the truth? That question broke something open. They began writing. The first attempt was too guarded. They deleted it. The second sounded like an apology without the full confession. They erased that too. The third began with your name and stopped after one sentence because emotion became stronger than their control. They are discovering that truth is difficult to write when it has been hidden for years. Every sentence opens another memory. Every explanation reveals another choice they wish they had made differently. They cannot tell you only part of it anymore. Once they begin, everything must come forward. This is why the message has not arrived yet. It is not because they changed their mind. It is because they are standing at the edge of a confession that will expose the deepest part of them. They know that once they speak, they cannot return to pretending the connection meant less than it did. And you, my child, must prepare, not by waiting anxiously, but by standing firmly in your truth. When the message comes, listen beyond the emotion. Do not allow urgency to make the decision for you. Their confession may be sincere, but your discernment still matters. You are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to take time. You are allowed to protect the peace you built. Love can be compassionate without becoming careless. The divine purpose of this revelation is not to place your heart back into uncertainty. It is to release you from the false story that you were forgotten. You were remembered. You were missed. You were loved in a way they were too frightened to express. But love hidden too long can become pain, and now they must decide whether they will transform that pain into honesty. Something huge is waiting for you in the final layer of this confession. There is one specific truth they have never told anyone, not their friends, not their family, not even the person who once influenced them against the connection. It concerns the exact day they decided to pull away. You believed they left because their feelings changed. They allowed you to believe that. But their feelings had not changed. On that day, they received news that made them believe being with them would eventually hurt you. They convinced themselves that disappearing was a form of protection. They chose silence because they did not want you to remain out of sympathy, obligation, or fear. The news may have involved a personal responsibility, a family situation, a burden from their past, or a future they suddenly believed they could not offer you. Whatever it was, it changed how they saw themselves. Instead of trusting you with the choice, they made the choice for you. They decided you deserved better. But they never asked what you wanted. They never gave you the dignity of knowing the truth. That is the regret beneath every other regret. They thought letting you go was love. Years later, they realized it was fear wearing the appearance of sacrifice. Now they are preparing to tell you what happened that day. They are preparing to explain why their voice changed, why their energy became distant, and why they looked back even while they were walking away. They want you to know that the final conversation was not the ending they wanted. It was the ending they believed they had no right to prevent. But there is one more detail. One detail they have hidden even from themselves. The news they received years ago may not have been the complete truth. Recently, they discovered something that changes the meaning of the sacrifice they made. Something was misunderstood. Something was exaggerated. Or someone deliberately allowed them to believe the worst because it served another person's interests. Your soulmate is now realizing that the decision that separated you may have been built upon incomplete information. That is why the urgency feels so strong. That is why the past is suddenly returning. That is why they are whispering in their heart, "Before I let you go, there is something I should have told you years ago." Because the truth is no longer only that they loved you. The truth is that someone knew they loved you, someone knew what they feared, and someone used that fear at the exact moment your future together was beginning to form. And now your soulmate has finally discovered who it was.